Welcome to City Church's On-Demand Messages. My name is Josh, and we're so glad that you're tuning in whenever and wherever you're tuning in from. In fact, it's possible that you either stumbled across us online or somebody shared this, and you are leading in maybe for the first time. If you have any questions or want to know more about who we are, we'd love for you to visit our website. In fact, if you can even plan your first visit on our website. If you've got kids, we have a kids ministry specifically for them. You can plan your visit. You can go ahead and check them in, learn more about what that will be like. Maybe a middle or high school student, we've got you covered. And so if you have any questions or anything that we can do for you, please just check out our website. Today's message is going to be very special, and we're thankful that you're tuning in. It'll be anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes. And so if we can do anything for you, please let us know. But enjoy today's message. Well, good morning. My name is Josh. I'm one of the pastors here, and super excited to be here with you. Excited to bring the next week of this series called The Power of Patterns. Before we do that, I want you to be aware of something that's happening next Sunday. Next Sunday, we will not be here. Okay, everything's fine. We just won't be here. And so we're going to be at the Park at 6 in downtown Griffin for Unite, which is a Sunday morning gathering that we do 3 times a year with local churches, where we just kind of all come together. We just believe from the bottom of our hearts that we just see it. Our city is divided. Our community is divided. And a divided community needs to see a united church. And so we believe that unity is so important within our church, but also within the bigger church. And so it's not just about City Church, it's about Jesus' church. And Jesus' church goes beyond 545 North Expressway. And so we partner with, I think there's going to be about 5 to 6 other churches that's going to be in the park that morning. So it's just a collective worship and collective teaching and all that. And so next Sunday, it's family service, so kids are with you. So come next Sunday morning, 10 a.m. at the Park at 6. You'll hear more about it this week. Follow us on social media, but that's going to be next week. So don't show up here. If you show up here, we won't be here. And I want you to be there. And so you're already used to getting up early because you're here at the 9:30 service. Give yourselves a hand for being at the 9:30 service this morning. Thank you so much. You may not know this, but by you showing up here to the 9:30, you are actually making room for more people at the 11. Last week at our 11 o'clock gathering, it was just packed. And so we actually asked our city builders, people that serve, if they would make a commitment to be here at 9:30. And you may not have known that, but you just showed up at the 9:30. So I would actually ask you to keep coming to the 9:30. It helps us out a ton. We started this church to reach people who don't know Jesus. There's 20,000 people in our city that don't know Jesus, and so that's why we exist. It's not saying that we don't like church people or love church people. We just know that that church is not for church people. Church is for people who don't know Jesus. And so we get to grow in that, and we get to be about that. And so by you showing up here at 9:30, you're just making more room for people to hear about that. So thank you. And this is just a guilt trip to keep coming to 9:30, okay? So we good? All right. So we're in this series called The Power of Patterns. And so we've been talking about patterns, not patterns we wear, but the patterns that we live out. Patterns are whatever we do consistently on a daily basis. It's the daily decisions that shape our life. And so we've had this phrase that we've been working through over the last 3 weeks. It's this, is that transformation happens when you do consistently what others do occasionally. That word transformation is the fancy word for true change. True change in our lives happens when you do consistently what some do occasionally. And so that can be for good or bad, but relationally. True change happens when you do consistently what others do occasionally, physically, financially, emotionally, and spiritually. When you do things consistently, you will see change. Now, that is one way or the other. But whatever you do consistently is how you will experience a change and transformation in your life. And so we believe there's these 3 patterns that if we live these things out, that we will see true transformation, because you will not rise to the levels of the desire or vision for your life. You will fall to the level of the patterns and the rhythms and the systems in your life. And so we talked about these 3. Prioritizing God's presence was number 1. We talked about that week 1. Week 2, we talked about the power and pattern of showing up consistently. And today we're going to talk about giving sacrificially. So I have a friend, his kids are older than mine, and so his daughter went to college, and he said, hey, as long as you keep your grades at this level of a GPA, I will cover your gas and your food. And so here's a credit card, and each month I'm going to pay it off. So about 2 months in, he noticed that the credit card bill was unusually high. And so he kind of dug a little deeper, and he called his daughter, and he said, hey, why are you spending, what are you eating at Chick-fil-A that it costs $45? Talk to me about that. And he was like, and your gas bill seems a little high and a little bit more frequent than it should be. Like when like there's just a lot of these eating out that it's just really high. And she goes, well, Dad, like I'm paying for my friends' meals. And he was like, why are you doing this? And she was like, Dad, you always taught me to be generous. And he said, yeah, but that's not your money. But it's a very true thing that we probably know and have experienced before. It's easier to give when it's not yours. It's easier to give when it isn't yours. Like if I've just got if the bank's full and it's not my money, it's way easier for me to give that than when it's actually mine. You see, when we talk about generosity and giving, most of us probably fall under one mindset, and it's this: the mindset of not enough. Maybe you said this before. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough. When we talk about resources, I don't have enough time. Have you ever said that? I don't have enough time in the day. Like I need like a 30-hour day, God, not a 24-hour day. Please, just give me a week of that, right? Or we say, I don't have enough skill or passion or talent to serve. I don't have enough bandwidth or capacity to lead the way I need to be. I don't want to have enough patience. I don't have enough grace. I don't have enough wisdom. We live in the world of not enough. And when we talk about giving sacrificially, I'm not just talking about finances. We're talking about resources in general. We live in this world of not enough. Now, the flip side of that is have a mindset of more than enough, right? Like, I have more than enough at all times. There's another scientific word for these things, and it's called a scarcity mindset or an abundance mindset. So scarcity mindset, within that scarcity mindset, things that are true of you, if you wrestle with this, is that you're probably stingy. Now, this is like scientifically, sociologically. This isn't even biblically yet, okay? Just in general, okay? So if Christian or non-Christian, this is where we live, okay? So stingy. People who have an abundance or more than enough mindset, sociologists say, are very generous. People who have a scarcity mindset and live in that are pretty selfish, because they're limited in their resources, right? And people that have an abundance mindset, they serve others really well. People with a scarcity mindset would say they're very suspicious of people. Very suspicious. When there's a lack of communication, they usually fill it with suspicion. People with an abundance mindset believe the best. People with a scarcity mindset, maybe you've been here, fear being replaced. Whether it's a job or friendships or whatever, they're going to find someone better because I just don't have enough. I don't have what it takes. And people with an abundance mindset, they strive to grow because every opportunity is an opportunity to grow. Now, the question is, how do we get from here to here? And your answer would probably be more. If I had more money, if I had more time, if I had more of anything. But here's the thing. I know people that have $10 in their bank account that would say, I don't have enough. I know people with $1,000 in their bank account that say they don't have enough. I even know a few people with $100,000 in their bank account that would say, I don't have enough. You see, the answer is never more. Because as long as you go after more, you will never be satisfied. You see, the path from not enough to enough, I think, is actually through this belief that it is easier to give when it isn't yours. So here's what we're going to do. I want to look at this kind of like big picture, this kind of case study in the Bible. It's in 2 Corinthians 8. That's where we're going to be for the majority of the time. You can turn there if you want. Like we do every Sunday, we're going to put a passage of Scripture on the screen. I'm going to circle some words and highlight some things, and then at the end of it, we're going to say, okay, God, what does this mean for us? So I want to show you a group of people that were living in an abundance, more than enough mindset. So it's this church in Macedonia. So chapter 8, verse 1 says this. We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means of their own accord. We'll come back to the next two verses in a few moments. So here's what we see is there's this church that they have gone through a severe test of affliction. It just basically means their lives have hit rock bottom. And they're in extreme poverty. And what he's telling us, what the writer, what Paul's saying here is that these two things, a severe test of affliction, and also I would say the grace of God and their extreme poverty have resulted in an overflow of generosity. which is not, you would look at this and say they've definitely got a not enough mindset. But for some reason, what they're going through resulted in overflow generosity. What did that generosity look like? They gave according to their means, so they gave in proportion to what they had. That's what that means. And then, as I can testify, so I saw this, and then they gave beyond their means of their own accord. Meaning that on their own, they gave beyond what was expected of them or what was proportionate to what they had. That they gave radically, they gave sacrificially. So there's this group of people that actually gave this amount of money, this amount of means, this amount of resources. And here's where the tension begins. Because many of us may feel like we're going through a severe test of affliction and may even be experiencing some form of extreme poverty. And our lives don't look like this. Our lives don't look like this, and we are stuck trying to get from not enough to enough. You see, this tension has always existed. In fact, at the beginning of time, when God created everything, Genesis chapter 2 tells us this, that he created man. And he took man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, "You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for the day that you eat of it, you will surely die." So he creates everything. He creates the earth, the heavens, he creates the sky, he creates man, he creates animals, all of this. And then he puts man in the middle of it and says, "I'm going to put you here to work it and to keep it." Now, work means to cultivate, and keep means to protect or to guard. So here's what he says. It says, "I'm going to put you in the middle of this to cultivate this land." Now, cultivate simply means, all it means is to unlock the potential of what you've been given, to get everything out of creation that God has provided, to unleash it. So he puts man in the middle of it and says, "I want you to manage this. I want you to cultivate this. I want you to guard it and to keep it." And the one thing, put that back up there, please. And the one thing that you cannot do is go to the tree of the garden of the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's the one thing you cannot eat from. Everything else is yours. Everything else is yours to manage, but just don't touch that tree. And what happens? The enemy comes and says, God doesn't want you to be like him. And so, and that's why he's telling you not to eat of this tree. And so what happens is that man is no longer satisfied being with God, and he now wants to be like God. In other words, man is no longer satisfied managing God's property. He wants to own God's property. And so what happens is this tension exists. And they fell because they were not content to be managers of what God had entrusted to them. You see, the worst thing that the manager can do is to force his rebellion on the owner's property. And that's exactly what Adam did. And from that point on, there has been this tension between us being owners and us being managers. And saying, I want this, I own this, I have this, it's mine. And saying, no, it's actually God's. So the question we have to wrestle with before we can even give sacrificially or get to that place is this, is who is the owner? When it comes to your stuff, who is the owner? When it comes to your resources, who is the owner? I can tell you what this says, and I can tell you what this says, and this is all I've got, right? This is my argument. And I can go through the entire Bible, and here's just a little glimpse of what it says about who is the owner. 1 Chronicles 29:14 says, "For all things come from you," talking about God. "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and the world and those who dwell therein." I love this one. This is my favorite. This is from God. "If I were hungry, I would not tell you. For the world and its fullness are mine." So God's like, listen, if I want a hamburger, I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to go get one of my animals and I'll get a hamburger, right? If I'm hungry, I can handle myself because I own it all already. I gave it to you. This is a good one. 1 Corinthians 6:19. So this is these are different writers in different periods of time, all saying the exact same thing. 1 Corinthians 6 says, "You are not your own." It says your body is a temple. So what he's saying is, hey, your feelings and what you want for your life and how you when you feel something, you say, well, it's my feeling, and so I'm going to act on that feeling, or whatever I want to do with my body, I can do. Actually, God says, no, everything I've created is mine. And so that means your body is mine. Your thoughts, mine. Your feelings, mine. All of it belongs to me. Revelation, the end of the Bible. We haven't even gotten there yet, right? For you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. See, throughout the entire narrative of the Bible, there is one common theme. God owns everything. Everything. And here's the thing. I think we actually deep down inside want him to own everything. Because I don't want to be responsible as an owner does for everything. But so many times we treat our lives like this is mine and I own it. I own it and I want to do what I want to do with it. And this tension exists. And we know anytime there is a difference of opinion between ownership and management, there's always going to be tension. I mean, you see it in sports all the time. Management wants to do one thing, ownership says do another thing, and all of a sudden it's all over SportsCenter, right? Anytime there is this tension and management wants to go one way and ownership wants to go another way, there will always be conflict. And many of us, it's what we feel today. And it's why not enough exists. It's because you look at what you have and you think it's yours. I look at what I have and I think it's mine. And so because it's mine, I have to hold on to it because it's mine and I can only trust myself with it. As opposed to saying, well, what if it actually belongs to God? And so if it belongs to God, I don't have to hold on to it so tight. And because it belongs to him, I'm actually not in control. I'm not Lord over it. And so because I'm not Lord over it, then I can actually trust the one who does own it. And then, if I can get there, man, what would my generosity, what would that look like? What would my mindset look like? You see, I think if we get this, that God owns everything, which then asks, then what do you own? What do I own? Nothing, including my life. We begin to understand what was happening, I think, in 2 Corinthians. We begin to understand what was happening in the church of Macedonia. We begin to understand what was happening in their hearts and also what was happening in their lives. So we'll jump back to our case study in the church of Macedonia. Chapter 8, verse 4 says this. So we know that they gave according to what they had, and then they gave beyond what they had, like this extreme sacrificial generosity, this sacrificial giving that came out of their extreme poverty and their test, their affliction that they were going through. All those things resulted in saying, I'm not going to give just what makes sense to give and what God has commanded me to give. I'm going to give beyond that sacrificially. And so here's what it says, verse 4, begging us. So they're not just like doing it, and not on their own accord, begging. They're begging, can we please, for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. So other churches in that area were suffering and hurting, and so Paul's going around trying to collect, and they're like, please, we're going through a lot right now, but God has done something in our hearts, and so we can't help but give. And this, not as we expected, because sacrificial giving is never expected. But what do? They gave themselves first to the Lord and then by the will of God to us. So what did the church of Macedonia do? How do they get to a posture and a place where they say, we're not just going to give what we have, we're going to give beyond that because we feel led to and inclined to on our own accord? What did they do first? They gave themselves first to the Lord. And then by the will of God, so the will of God, what he wanted them to do to us, they began to sacrificially give. They gave themselves first to the Lord. You see, what happened before they ever got into a place of giving and of generosity was they first had to understand whose they belong to and who they belong to. They had to get there first because you can't give your resources to the purpose of God until you first give yourself to the person of God. See, one flows from the other. And so if you're trying to force yourself out of a not enough mindset, a scarcity mindset by just giving more, it's actually not going to work if you first haven't given your life to God. If you haven't entrusted your life to him and who he is and what he's about. Because you see, one flows from the other. Because if God has you, if he has your life, if you've given up ownership of your life and your desires and your will to him, then he has your time. Like the not enough, he actually has all of it, and he owns all of it, and he gave it all to you. He has your breath in your lungs, and so because he owns it, he owns that even, then you're willing to give that up to him. He has your talents. And so the not enough that you feel like, I don't have enough skill, I don't have talent to contribute anywhere. No. God gave that to you, so he's the giver of the gift. And so because he has that and he has you, then he has your talents. And so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to give them away. I'm going to sacrificially give. And he also has your resources and your finances. If God has your heart, then he has all those other things as well. If God has your heart, then you don't mind this sermon. If God has your heart, then he has all of you. Because sacrificial giving, Macedonia kind of giving, it's a signal. It's a signal that something has happened in a person's heart. That generosity is the proof that God's grace has been working in their hearts. And you can see how grace is present in someone's heart by the generosity that they show. Because before you can give sacrificially, you have to give up ownership. Before you can get to a place where you say, okay, what I have is not mine, you first have to give up ownership of your life. I have to give up ownership of my life and then allow God to lead and do the rest. This is where the conflict lies, right? Because I'm afraid that if I give this, whatever that is, my time, financially, if I give of like my talents in serving in a space, if I give of that, well, what if I don't have enough energy to make it through the rest of this week? If I give of that, what if I don't have enough finances to make it through the rest of this week? Now, I'm not saying to give irresponsibly. I'm just saying that if we actually believe that God owns everything, then my first question is not, what am I going to do? It's, God, I'm going to trust you because you're telling me to do this, whatever that is. And because of that, God, I trust you in this moment, and so I trust you for tomorrow as well. And I trust you for the next day and the next day. That has nothing to do with amount and more, and everything to do with you actually giving up ownership of your life and your future and your trust and saying, God, I'm going to trust you with it. I'm going to trust you with everything. If you want the full expression of God's transformational power in your life, first you've got to give up ownership. Because in God's kingdom, ownership opportunities are not available, but management opportunities are. And when I understand that what I've been given now, I get to, because it's not mine, I get to manage it. And I mean, there's so much in the Bible about how do we manage that, but I get to actually cultivate, as Adam did, where God has placed me and what he has entrusted to me. I get to take it and maximize it and make the most of it. And once we begin to see this thing and ask this question of, okay, what does this look like for me? We begin to understand this. It's easier to give when it isn't yours. It's easier to give when you believe that what you have isn't yours because you trust the one who owns it all. So I want to give us space to work through maybe some resistance you're feeling right now. Because the resistance to generosity that you're feeling is not an amount problem, it's an ownership problem. It's not you don't have enough, it's that you're trusting the wrong thing or the wrong person. And so this is just a time to reflect. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and then I'm actually going to give you a time to respond. We want to give you a space to respond. So here's just 3 questions. What does what you do with your resources reveal about what you delight in? So where you put your time, where you put your energy, where you put your passion, and where you put your money, what does it reveal to you about what you delight in? What brings you joy right now? What does it reveal about that? Look where your time's going. Look where your dollars are going. Look where all of that's going, and say, okay, then where it's going, then I'm telling myself that this brings me joy, that this brings me delight. And the question is, does it really? Like everlasting, true joy. What does what you do with your resources reveal about what you trust in? Or who you trust in? What is what you do with your time, with your passion and talents, and with your finances, your resources? What does what you do with those things reveal about who you trust? If there's a scarcity issue, and we're living into that, then there's also a suspicion issue, right? Which means I'm suspicious whether God is actually faithful, whether I can actually trust him. And last one is, what does what you do with your resources reveal about whose kingdom you are building? So I think the most terrifying thing for me is to know that I can, not you, but I can go through my life and look at what God has entrusted to me to manage and to steward, and to get to the end of it and look back and say, I did a really good job of building up my kingdom. Or, because here's the thing, I think that when we get to the end of our lives, I don't think we're going to wish that we had given less and spent more. Like, I don't think when I get to the end of my life that I'm going to say, man, you know what? Really wish I would have bought that car. Really wish I would have bought that bigger house. I don't think we're going to get to the end of our life and say, you know what? I wish I wouldn't have been so generous. Because I think as we get to the end of our life, we begin to look back. And when I look back, I want for my life, for my kids' life, for my family's life, I want for all of our lives to look back and say, you know what? With the time that I was given, with the money that I was given, with the talents and abilities that I was given, with the relationships I was given, I managed those to the best of my ability because I knew who the owner was.